You're listening to The Brand Compass, conversations to navigate your way to building a brand fit for purpose and poised for success. Here's your host, Shelley Röstlund.
Hello there, my friend. How are you doing? Gosh, you know what? I'm doing well. Some days I'm not always sure. But today I think I can confidently say I am good. If you are a regular to the show, you would have been on a bit of a journey with me through all these many episodes, and you will have decided whether I'm worth tuning into regularly. God, I hope I am, and thank you so much. If you're new to the show and new to me, welcome. This is the place where a South African bird, me, helps you to navigate these open conversations about all the ways in which your brand meets the humans you serve. Now, while I've been thinking about this topic for today, I was trying to be really smart and reinvent the wheel as such, but I quickly realized that's a real fool's errand because I was inspired by someone I admire who had already cracked this. So I had a quick word with myself and thought I would just share his premise directly with you and then help to maybe make it relevant for you as the consultant, coach, mentor that you are listening. Today I'm going to talk to you about how you physically speak and communicate with your clients or with an audience when you are recording a video, delivering a webinar, or even just being on a podcast show. And we know we need to do a lot of these things as a part of building out our personal brand and getting people to get to know us, right? So I want to introduce you to vocal archetypes, and particularly how Vinh Giang describes these in his communication skills training. Honestly, Vinh is an absolute model of excellence if you are looking for someone to listen to or even emulate when it comes to flexing your communication skills. In this episode, I'm going to walk you through some core foundations to communicating effectively, and then I'm going to share the 4 main vocal archetypes that Vinh teaches in his communication training. There are more, but he says that he feels like these are the main 4 ones that we really need to concentrate. This relates to you because you have to speak literally a lot in your work, in your consulting, your advising, or even in teaching your clients. Are you ready? All right, let's go. Now, I was prompted to do this episode because I was reminded how powerful the awareness of this is, especially for people who are up on a stage speaking. I watched 2 examples at a recent event, and let me tell you, one absolutely nailed it, and I loved it, and the other was completely unaware, and for me, just really failed to keep my attention. On reflection, and in actually planning this episode and having to kind of revisit everything I've learned from Vinh, I thought, oh, you know what? Now I know why that speaker, the second one, completely lost me. And really, it's all about what I'm going to share with you today. Now, before I get into this, because I'm going to lean very much into his teaching, let me tell you a bit about Vinh Giang. So I came across him when he went on Chris Do's podcast show called The Future. And while the conversation was superb and I was hooked in all the way, I tell you, Vinh talked about how he was inspired to really get to the nitty-grittiness of communication skills when his little boy was diagnosed with autism. And while he was already teaching and speaking about communication skills, when this happened, he had to engage specialists to literally just sit with him and give him the deep knowledge that he wanted about how he can best communicate and help his son. My goodness, I was completely drawn into this because for me, he was completely reiterating the high importance and need for people with deep knowledge. The kind of knowledge gold that you only get from subject matter experts. So as a side note to you, my friend, keep building on that gorgeous brain bank that you have. There are many people out there who need you in the world, so keep doing what you're doing. Anyhow, back to Vinh. So he had me hooked, and I started following him on socials, and I signed up for his masterclasses on communication skills towards the end of last year. And it was one of the best remotely delivered courses, because he's in Australia, I've ever done. Honestly, he's completely amazing. And I will also give a shout out to Dan Yo, his partner in crime, who's also married to his cousin. It's a very family-based operation, which I also love. And Dan is a trained psychologist, and together they actually are such a force to be reckoned with. All 200 plus attendees of those masterclasses, we just wanted to adopt Vinh and Dan and take them home with us. They were that good. It was phenomenal, especially when it was delivered via Zoom. So it just shows you what can be done if you actually know these core foundations to communication skills, which he definitely does. He's just perfection at play when it comes to communication. I mean, humans are magical, but Vinh, honestly, he is a wizard. Now, this brings us back to today's topic. In that training that Vinh did, he talked about two big things that I wanted to share with you today. And again, complete recognition going to him. I'm just relaying this on his behalf to you because I feel like you need it. So, while there are two main things I'm going to go through, there's three things I want you to take away from today's episode. Number one, your voice is an instrument. As a subject matter expert who very much is dependent on your voice to deliver your value together with your brain, of course, you need to look at your voice as an instrument that needs to be looked after and used properly. I'm not going to get into this point very much in this episode. Suffice to say, though, think of your voice like a piano keyboard. I think there's 88 keys in a piano keyboard, right? So how many of those keys are you actually using in terms of the breadth and spectrum of your voice as an instrument? I suspect only a couple of keys. Second point I want you to take away from today's episode is that there are these core foundations to effective communication, which are directly linked to the use of your voice. Now, I'll give you what they are and a top level description as we go through the episode, so you can really understand these when we get into your vocal archetypes. The third and last thing that I want you to take away from today is that there are these vocal archetypes. All right, so this is focusing on your style of delivering your communication, whether that be speaking to a group, in a workshop, delivering a webinar, or even speaking on stage. Now, you won't just have one archetype. The point is to use a mix of these in order to be more engaging and keep the attention of the people in front of you. Now, let's start with those core foundations to communication that Vinh teaches. Honestly, these make sense when you listen to them, so they won't be new to you, but it will be a helpful reminder for you to take these things on board, because I think we get lost in our day-to-day, don't we? The 5 foundations are rate of speech, volume, pitch and melody, tonality, and pausing. Now I'm going to run through a brief description of each of these, because what it will do is help you to wrap your head around the vocal archetypes that we're going to talk about next. And then when you listen to these descriptions, I want you to think about some people that you have come across who you were completely and absolutely engaged in listening to, and you thought they were fantastic. And also try to bring to mind someone, if you can remember them, who may have come across really bland and seemed disconnected or disinterested even in what they were actually saying. Then see if they've actually missed the mark on some of these core foundations we're going to go through. Okay, first one, rate of speech. Now, this does what it says on the tin. Basically, it's important to vary the rate of your speech so that you don't have one just default rate of speech. So you may then come across as disengaged or bored or even monotonous. Okay? If it's something important, for example, you might slow down your rate of speech so that what you're saying really brings home the point you're trying to make. Or alternatively, you might speed up the rate that you're talking in order to build up excitement and move your listener on. Did you see what I did there? Okay. Next foundation, volume. Now, I like the way Vinh describes this. He describes it as your life force of your voice. And he talks about you having this range or scale of volume being from 1 to 10, and then practicing what each of those levels actually sounds like for you. Because if you only ever speak at, say, for example, a really low level, that might create the perception for people that you are potentially shy or timid or don't really have an opinion. Or if, for example, you started to speak more at a volume of, say, 6 to 7, you might come across more confident and speaking with authority. It's a fairly easy one to understand, right? Third foundation is pitch and melody. I don't think many people get this right, I have to say. Basically, the more melody that you speak with, the more memorable you will be. And Vinh likes to say that melody lives underneath your voice, which sounds kind of magical, doesn't it? He made us practice, for example, in the masterclasses by reading a children's book. So if you think about when you read a children's book to your child or to a child, you almost sing your sentences, and you really change the pitch and melody of how you're speaking. Number 4 is tonality. This is the emotive meaning that's underneath your voice. And actually, this is a fun one because it really involves facial expressions. So at the moment, if you're not watching the video, I am very animated. My hands are going, my face is going, I'm smiling. Can you hear it in my voice that I'm smiling, right? So basically, the way Vinh described this is your face is your remote control for injecting emotion into your voice. And it's true. The 5th core foundation, this is about pauses, putting pauses in your speech so that you give people time to process the things you are saying. See what I did there? Especially important if you're actually delivering something that is a bit more complex or of really great importance. Pauses also help you to overcome those non-words and filler words. Okay. All right. So we've done the 5 core foundations, which were, remember, rate of speech, volume, pitch and melody, tonality, and pausing. Okay. Now you've got that basis of knowledge. We can actually move on now and talk about these vocal archetypes, okay? Now, there are many more, like I said, but Vinh's basically drilled them down, which is great. I love simplicity, to say that there are 4 main ones that we really need to focus on in order to communicate more effectively on our day-to-day basis. I feel like the reason I wanted to share this and why it was important is because of these 2 speakers that I saw at this big conference. And while I found one really incredible and the other one fell really flat for me, and then after thinking about it, I just came down to the one that really engaged me was actually flexing a mix of the vocal archetypes. And the other speaker was almost stuck in one archetype, but also didn't actually flex these foundations that we've just talked about. So fairly same rate of speech, very monotonous tone, not many pauses at all. It was a lot of words, if you like, without, being able to kind of stop and think or figure out what was going on. Curious? Right. All right, let's dig into these 4. And when I work through them, I'm going to invite you to do 2 things, okay? I want you to think Do you think, as I'll go through each of these archetypes, I want you to reflect on yourself, right? So do you think you have a default one that you're kind of stuck with? And which of the 4 archetypes would you like to play with more, because it may actually make a big difference to how you connect and engage with your clients? Now, the hint here, as I said before, is that actually you will want to flex at least 3 of these archetypes at any point. The idea is not to have a default, but to rather know when you can move between them. And that way you'll be a much more effective communicator. You know, sometimes, if you're trying to think like, how does that actually work in real life, Shelley? Sometimes you could actually move between different archetypes within 3 to 5 minutes, right? It's highly dependent on the type of consultancy or delivery or speaking or talking that you're doing. Remember, this is also relevant for your content creation to help support marketing yourself and your proposition. Sound good? Great. Let's get into the 4 vocal archetypes. Number 1 is called the motivator. Now, you're going to know who this is just as I'm explaining this, who you'll think of as an example, okay? The goal of this one is basically, as it says on the tin, right? This archetype is to motivate, and to use this archetype, you'd increase your rate of speech, so you'd be talking faster. You would speak in what's called legato, which means your tone of words would basically link together just really harmoniously, right? You'd use really open facial expressions, and you'd really move with purpose. So you wouldn't be meandering across the stage. You'd walk very purposefully, or go from one side to another side, or use your hands quite purposefully. And you speak at a relatively high energy with probably a 7+ in terms of your volume. So think Tony Robbins, okay? Tony's got pretty much one archetype, and that's the motivator, right? I'm sure he does move between them when he does different work, but we only see that on the outside, right? The second vocal archetype is called the educator. The goal of this one is to inform and provide new insights. So to use this archetype, you'd use a lower rate of speech. You'd use pauses to give listeners time to process. You would have more of a matter-of-fact pitch, and probably end a sentence with a lower pitch. You probably keep your movement down to a minimum. So if you know Sir Ken Robinson, he's very much an educator archetype. There's TED Talks with him as well, so you can probably see what he does. Next up is the coach. Again, the goal of this one is what it is, all right, to coach, guide, instruct. For this archetype, you probably increase your volume to at least 7+. You'd use like a staccato rhythm, which is very short sentences, so punchy words and said very quickly, if you like. You'll probably have very strong body language, so a lot of hand gestures potentially, and lots of pointy fingers. And the language, like I said, very punchy and direct. Think along the lines of a football coach, okay? That's a very easy one to have. And believe it or not, Oprah actually uses this archetype quite a bit. If you watch her show or her content, you'll catch her in this archetype. She's very good at moving though and mixing them with the next archetype I'm going to bring in. So your 4th and final vocal archetype is friend. The goal of this one is basically to connect with a listener or the audience. So for this archetype, you're conversational, you have lots of melody in your voice, you've got very relaxed body language, you use some fillers and non-words like or okay or those kinds of things. Think along the lines of your best friend, right? So Brené Brown uses this archetype to great effect. Okay, so there we are. Those are the 4. So motivator, educator, coach, and friend. Now, which one sounds like how you communicate the most in? And can you potentially see the value of mixing them up depending on what you're doing? Now, the 2 speakers I was talking about that I saw at this conference, the one that I loved was very good at mixing motivator and friend, and his storytelling and his linking was seamless. Body language was wide and embracing and really animated and underlined what was being said. The speaker that I thought fell flat only really stayed in one archetype, but it wasn't very succinct or clear for me to actually work out were they going for motivator, educator, coach. It was actually a bit confusing being on the receiving end, as the body language didn't match what was going on. The pitch and tone also didn't really change. And also the word count was so high, it could quite easily have been cut in half. So something also to remember is superfluous, extended storytelling and no real point being made in the end of it or linking it back to the learning you want to get across to an audience is quite detrimental to the effectiveness of the message you're trying to get across. And I have to say, for this particular event, for me, the speaker was actually at the end of the day, so attendee fatigue was set in, which probably did not help at all. So it was a bit of a recipe for disaster, to be honest. But can you see how your communication style and your skills really has an impact on how effective you will be in getting your ideas or even advice across to your clients? Your tone, your energy, and your self-awareness are so very important, don't you think? I will leave it for there today, my folks. So was that useful? You know, I will pop some resources to point you in Vinh Giang's direction if you want to follow him. He does have a few free resources you can sign up to if you feel like getting a taste of him. He's honestly a lovely light to follow in this world. As a subject matter expert doing consulting, coaching, mentoring, or advising, your art of communicating is really what will be a good part of why people choose to work with you. I hope this episode has really helped to get you to refresh your thinking on how you conduct yourself in front of audiences, whether that be on video, in podcasts, or even in actually delivering your work. I know I did an episode a good while back. I think it was episode 11. It's a very short one. It's only 7 minutes. And it was about avoiding speaking in consultant speak. And it might be useful to just listen that one together with this episode. And it might help with what you're trying to refresh for yourself. In that one, I really remind you how to simplify what you're saying to your clients and to remember to bring them with you on the journey and not talk to them from a lofty height. I'm going to do a quick listener shout out before we close off. So a big thank you to 𝗘𝗣𝗜𝗦𝗘𝗟𝗟, who is a talented copywriter based in Northamptonshire. Thank you for always giving me lovely feedback, Natalie. Every time I see you and you tell me how you enjoyed and gave me feedback on episodes that you've listened to when you're driving in the car, going to networking and client appointments, thank you. And also to Lois Cliff, who is in You Are the Media, which is the community I'm in. She's based in South Wales, and she left me a lovely review on Apple Podcasts. And she said, and I'm just going to read what she said, "This podcast is such a good listen for me, as it's everything I'm interested in and need to understand more deeply as a business owner. Shelley also has really great people on who aren't one-dimensional cardboard cutouts, but have real lives and real personalities, so you can relate and understand more." Oh, thanks, Lois. That's a great testimonial. Thank you so much. And as always, guys, it's really wonderful to hear from you, and it helps me to know I'm not talking to a big black dark hole on the other side of this microphone. If you want a shout out, give me a DM, find me on LinkedIn, find me on Instagram. I'm the only Shelley Röstlund out there. And if you enjoyed today's episode, remember to bookmark it, send it to a friend who could do with listening to it, because we could all do with that friend that sends us great resources. And also do a review on whichever app you listen to, and I would love to read it out as well and let other people know how you think and how you feel about the podcast. But until next time, my friend, stay strong, believe you have value, and make good brand decisions.
Thank you for listening to The Brand Compass. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with your entrepreneurial friends and help them make good brand decisions. Until next time, let's keep the conversation going at 𝗘𝗣𝗜𝗦𝗘𝗟𝗟.com.